From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1, Slaughter in San Bernardino.
Mayhem came to San Bernardino, California on Wednesday when 2 terrorists, Syed Farouk, age 28, and Tashfeen Malik, age 27, shot 14 people dead and wounded 17 more, 10 critically. San Bernardino is on the eastern edge of Los Angeles. Investigators believe Farouk and Malik were seeking to align themselves with a Syria and Iraq-based, quote-unquote, Islamic State terrorist group. Over the last year, Islamic State has called for attacks in the West. It was also responsible for the recent terrorist attacks in Paris. Farouk and his accomplice targeted their victims at the Inland Regional Center, which specializes in supporting developmentally impaired individuals. The attack has reignited 2 contentious U.S. debates. One debate over gun control laws and the other debate over President Obama's strategy for fighting ISIS. Democrats say U.S. gun laws need to be tightened to keep firearms away from unstable individuals. Republicans say President Obama must use more aggressive force in fighting the Islamic State on its home territory and with more U.S. troops on the ground. Commander-in-Chief Obama addressed the San Bernardino horror, citing the anomalies in our U.S. terrorism control laws.
For those who are concerned about terrorism, some may be aware of the fact that we have a no-fly list where people can't get on planes, but those same people who we don't allow to fly could go into a store right now in the United States and buy a firearm, and there's nothing that we can do to stop them. That's a law that needs to be changed.
Why is President Obama at pains, apparently, to divert attention from his administration's failure to prevent this terrorist attack by scapegoating guns? You understand the question?
Yeah, I do, John. There's no doubt about it. The president has been dead wrong. He said ISIS has been contained. It's a JV, and we've got them in this area, and it's they are diminishing in terms of the area they control. But now what ISIS is doing, I believe, and I think this is an example because we now have connections between that woman and ISIS is being hammered in its base, and it is lashing out and I think calling into action sleeper cells and other attackers in the West to do the kind of massacre that took place in Paris and in San Bernardino, basically to make its statement to the world that we are fighting the West and we are at war with the West, and it's very successful. And I think the president is almost in denial. I mean, up until Friday, he had not mentioned Islamic terror or ISIS or anything in connection with this. And I think the whole Democratic Party is trying to return it into a debate on gun control. And that's a debate, quite frankly, they are losing. The country is looking at Islamic terrorism.
It may go further. Washington Post fact checkers took Obama to task for using false statistics in his claims about mass shooting. Are you surprised that the president is stretching the truth again? Eleanor?
No, I'm just surprised you're stretching the truth again, trying to blame this whole thing on President Obama. This is a new form of terrorism, if in fact it bears out to be that. It looks like the woman in this Bonnie and Clyde pair is the key, and she spent some time in Saudi Arabia, and one of the theories that they're investigating is that Saudi-based terrorists are using what's called the honeypot, putting brides out there, Islamic brides, to entice American Muslim men into acts of terror, if you will. I think there's so much we don't know. There's so many oddities to this, where a young mother with a 6-month-old baby would go on this kind of killing revenge, and why they would choose a target that really doesn't have huge symbolic value. So I don't know if we're going to find that this is directed from ISIS Central somewhere, or these are people who get inspired, or what kind of network they have here at home. I think there's just a lot we don't know, but the recruiting tools and social media have really transformed the way radicalism can take root. And I know no matter how many troops you send in, and I don't think more troops are the answer, is not going to solve this. It's a very different kind of terrorism, and I think so far President Obama has the right tone, attitude, and strategy.
What's the best way to diminish the appeal of ISIS to disaffected Muslims? I ask you.
Well, I think the key thing here is to recognize that there is a connection point between the success, the perceived success of the Islamic State in spreading, and I would disagree with Pat slightly in terms of if you look at the territory in North Africa, Libya, Tunisia, Indonesia, across the Middle East, in Europe now with these attacks, but also this direction where you have the Islamic State being able to perceive itself to others as this empire, this caliphate that has succeeded, that is untouchable by the United States, that has recruits, this woman being inspired apparently, and again Eleanor is right that we have to wait for the facts. The problem there is that where that exists, the narrative of propaganda is self-fueling and self-perpetuating and attracting more recruits. So how do you do it? You have to puncture the banner. That black flag that they wave around is very important as a symbol of power. What you have to do is to be much more aggressive in confronting them, both on their lines of control in Iraq and Syria, but also to some degree having more special forces aligned with the Sunni tribes in Anbar and Deir ez-Zor, which is western Iraq and eastern Syria, and to usurp it, to say that actually Sunni Muslims are the ones most abused by the Islamic State, which they are, and that they are usurping the Islamic faith in terms of Sunni Islam, and through that you build that political and military dialogue. But I would agree with Pat in the sense our present strategy of sort of the president in denial doesn't help, because ultimately it is a bound up in ideology and military dynamics.
Clarence?
Well, he's not totally in denial. I mean, the president is responding to changing conditions and also trying not to get the U.S. too far out over its skis over there. That's why in England, a country you're familiar with, they're debating about sending in troops as well, even at a time when they've been cutting back their military spending, just as we are, and also war-weary as they are, understandably. And also we're seeing ISIS now is moving. Pat's right. They're getting pummeled on the ground in Syria and Iraq, but at the same time, they're moving internationally. This is a new way of using Facebook, using the singles marriage market, a bride shopping market, and all to infiltrate the U.S. And significantly, this fellow is not a refugee. He was born and raised in Chicago. All this talk about the danger of refugees, they are the most carefully screened. But people here on the visa waiver program or the bridal waiver in this case,
Clarence, something really happened to this guy. That he would go in and slaughter all of these friends and co-workers. Apparently, there was any great dispute on that. But let me say, to Tom's point, a lot of groups, because of the success in Paris, the success in massacres, are identifying their own cause. I think Boko Haram in Nigeria, they're all saying, we're an affiliate now, we're an affiliate now. The radical Islamists, this guy, ISIS is winning because it's perpetrating these horrible acts of terror, and it looks like it's winning.
And if we have more incidents like this, and I sure hope that doesn't happen, the gun debate would change very quick in this country if we recognize how easy it is for people to come in and get AK-47s. Assault weapons should be taken off of the market.
The cops had semi-automatic weapons, fired 300 shots, killed them all. People are buying guns today. You can bet on it.
That was
I'm glad the cops had it. For the fact that you can't get on a plane, but you can still buy a weapon, that is shameful that the Congress couldn't even pass that. They're so in the grips of the National Rifle Association.
Let's move it along. Exit question. How badly will this terrorist attack hurt Obama politically? Will the impact be A, major, B, significant, minor, C, or D, inconsequential?
I think it's major, but I think this, John. People consider the president, I hate to say it, mildly irrelevant in all this right now, and the country is moving to the right.
Helena.
I give it a C, and the Republicans are going to exploit the hell out of this and create as much fear as they possibly can.
Right, we know they're good at that.
And they are good at that, that's right.
It's major because people recognize the disconnect between the president's statements and the policy dynamics on the ground.
Well, I think President Obama does need to get ahead of this story, frankly, because we are certainly in a situation of national fear, understandably, and national anger. And
is it
he
major,
has to convey,
significant, minor, or inconsequential?
I'll give it an 8.5, John. How about that? But the fact
8.5 sounds to me like
significant. He's saying significant.
Very significant. Yeah.
Very significant. I think you're right on track. I call it major. Not only a strategy to contain ISIS failed overseas, but now it has failed at home. Watch for Obama's approval rating to drop below 40%. Issue 2: boots on the ground.
We're deploying a specialized expeditionary targeting force to assist Iraqi and Kurdish Peshmerga forces and put even more pressure on ISIL.
President Obama has long opposed U.S. boots on the ground. No deployment of combat ground forces to fight the Islamic State terrorist group, also known as ISIL and ISIS. But this week, Commander-in-Chief Obama's Defense Secretary, Ash Carter, announced that a, quote, expeditionary force, unquote, of Special Operations Forces will be deployed, boots on the ground, to Iraq to fight ISIS. A small number of those U.S. Special Operations Forces are already operating in northern Syria. The new expeditionary force will have 3 main objectives. First, it will gather intelligence on ISIS terrorist leaders and operations. Second, it will work with local forces to attack ISIS bases and rescue hostages. Third, it will assist U.S. and coalition jets in destroying ISIS targets. And while Republicans in Congress and many Democrats have welcomed the deployments, not everyone is happy. Some liberals fear a quagmire, and some conservatives believe that this expeditionary deployment is not sufficient.
What is President Obama's rationale for putting combat boots on the ground? I ask you, Eleanor Cliff.
His rationale is that this is a doubling down of the strategy he already has in place, and it's not a massive invasion of tens of thousands of troops. I think the number they've put on it is 200. And I think it's kind of the least bad option that's available. He keeps asking other people, if you have better ideas, tell me what they are. And putting a substantial number of U.S. troops on the ground in a Muslim country is counterproductive, disastrous. The flaw in this strategy is that there have to be boots on the ground to hold any ground taken back from ISIS, and so far none of the Sunni nations have been willing to put that up. So
there's one of the problems.
More of the same.
The Iraqi government has said we don't want America's expeditionary force. The Shia militia, whom we fought during the Iraq War, says we may be shooting at the Americans. And this is a very small force, frankly, and you hear talk of entering troops into Syria. It is time that the Congress of the United States and the Republican Party either pass or rejected an authorization of military force, because we are getting into this thing on the side of the Turks, who are up against the Russians, and you've got a real problem coming down the road of a direct conflict with Russia.
Let me just complicate matters a little bit and say that part of the problem here is that term boots on the ground. What do we mean by that? Because right now we've already got...
we know what boots on the ground.
John, we have over 3,000 men over there now, men and women over there right now. They all wear boots, but that's not boots on the ground. When we talk about boots on the ground, we're talking about combat brigades, battalions.
We're talking about military action. That was what I stated.
Well, these are mostly support for the drones and the planes in the air. You need to have special ops on the ground to be able to identify your targets. Now, that's not the same as moving in with battalions that are taking land. This is all a specialized part of the operation.
I don't think I'm going to sleep better tonight for hearing that.
Very quick. Sleep better, John. This is really in control.
I do think it is too little in terms of movement. The reason you can't get the Sunni Arabs buying in is because they see the United States having betrayed them over Iran. Right or wrong, Pat would say that's right course of action. But at the same time, look, this is good that we have people who can call in airstrikes on the ground now. Right. It will mobilize more people. Hopefully it engages the Sunni tribes. But as the secondary point, what I think you're seeing in Iraq is actually, the Iraqi government condemned this, but interestingly, the Abadi government actually behind the scenes approved this. What I think you see going on here is the United States trying to say to Prime Minister Abadi, stand up and build this cross-sectarian government, and you know what, we're going to have your back a bet here against those Shia militias on the Iranian side. And actually, on that, I commend President Obama.
Ash Carter said in his testimony that the troops are there at the invitation of the Iraqi
internal
government.
Iraqi.
They're playing some politics and things they say, but those troops are
there
there by invitation.
The Sunnis and the pro-Western Sunnis in Anbar province are scared to death of the Shia militia coming in and liberating
so the
them
Soft can
because it means
them,
the end of them.
Well, that's the failure of the Iraqi government. And look, you're going to hear cries of mission creep and slippery slope and all of that. But I do think this comes under the heading of tweaking. And if this strategy has any hope of succeeding, the tweak was needed.
Okay, let's move it along. Putin versus Erdogan.
We will long remember what they did, and they will long regret what they did. We know what needs to be done.
We do not want any tension. For the time being, with Russia, we have consultations at the highest level, very advanced economic relations. So, with a country in such a situation, how could we wish for such a tension?
A Russian Air Force jet entered Turkey's airspace last week and was shot down by Turkish fighter jets. Recall that Turkey is a member of NATO, the Western alliance set up to deter the Soviet Union, which is now Russia. But while one Russian airman was rescued, his co-pilot was killed by rebels on the ground. A Russian Marine was also killed during the rescue. In response, Russia bombed a Turkish aid convoy in northern Syria and has now deployed fighter escorts and advanced anti-air missile systems into Syria. The risks are clear. As a NATO member, Turkey has the right to ask for NATO military support, including from the United States, if Russia attacks its territory.
How serious is the friction between Russia and Turkey? I ask you, Clarence.
Well, we certainly don't want to see World War III develop in that area, but this is serious in terms of the anger on both sides. But Putin the other day said that he's not interested in military action. But they're definitely exercising sanctions as far as economic sanctions, diplomatic sanctions. There's a big oil pipeline that Erdogan's family has a big interest in, which the Russians are just suspending talks on that. So they're putting pressure on, and it's going to stay on.
You know that Turkey has good beaches. And you know what's happening now? Russian tourists are canceling plans to visit Turkish beaches.
John,
and Turkey is being vilified as hostile to Russian
John,
visitors
this is a little more
and a dangerous place to visit.
John, this is more serious than a lot of words here. What the Turks did was stupid and dangerous. Shooting down a Russian plane.
Was it accidental?
It wasn't any accident. The plane was over this slice of Turkey for 17 seconds or something. It was deliberate. It was an ambush of that plane. Let me say this. Erdogan is an unstable guy in my judgment, and we cannot allow Erdogan, who's a member of NATO, to drag this country into a shooting confrontation with Russia.
No, but
that's the real danger.
Neither country wants a shooting war, and what Erdogan reacted that way because the Russians have been bombing Turkmen and in Syria. They're ethnic Turks, and it was sending a message. The problem is you have two strong men here. Neither of them is very good at backing down. So I think President Obama's got a task on his hand to sort of de-escalate the whole thing. And I think so far it's calming down.
Let's have a little bit of other erudition in here. The European Union cut a deal with Turkey for 3 billion euros and aid in joining the European Union in exchange for Turkey sealing its borders to refugees and migrants. Isn't that a deal? Isn't that deal a threat to Russia's interest, I ask you?
Well, look, Russia wants that because of the energy pipeline going through Turkey. Russia has been trying to bring Erdogan back to the orbit. I agree with Pat. I mean, Erdogan clearly is a bit of a wacko. I mean, that is clear in terms of his things he's done before, banning Twitter. He is an unstable guy. His son has a problem because the Russians really don't like his son because what he's been messing around with some oil with ISIS. The problem is, I would say, why I would disagree with Pat, is that The Russians have been doing this. They've been pushing the line and crossing over into Turkish airspace. Turkey has a right to defend its airspace. What I would say as well, though, is that the United States can play more of an influential role on Erdogan if we were to see, with this escalation actually in Syria with the special forces recently, that provides us more credibility because these Turkish are obsessed with Assad. But you have to be able to influence.
But who are we fighting? We're fighting ISIS, well, presumably. And Assad is fighting ISIS, and the Russians are fighting ISIS, and Hezbollah is fighting ISIS.
Fighting ISIS.
But we're fighting both sides.
Yeah, but they've got other agendas that they're also accomplishing.
Yeah, exactly. The key thing is no confrontation.
They're all at cross purposes. So
no confrontation between America and Russia, because nothing in Syria justifies a conflict.
But how do you do that? If you say to Erdogan, listen, do not go over there and cross the line, but at the same time, but you say to Vladimir Putin, do not cross into Turkish airspace. Because it's a NATO member and we will defend our ally.
If you shoot down another Russian plane, goodbye and good luck, you're on your own.
Multiple choice exit question. What impact will it have on ISIS if the Iraqi offensive to retake Ramadi succeeds? Will it be A, catastrophic, the beginning of the end of ISIS's pretense of statehood? B, major, because it will show ISIS can be beaten? C, minor, because Ramadi is far from ISIS's strongholds? Or D, negligible? Buchanan.
I think it's significant. It's not like Mosul, but it is significant because steady defeats of ISIS are the best thing that can happen because it takes away their great cachet worldwide.
ISIS has the veneer of invincibility. So you're partially correct. I'm helping Eleanor out with her answer.
I'm going to say negligible because the assessment that ISIS was mainly interested in building their caliphate and their state has proved to be wrong, that they are now interested in exporting their fanaticism, and I think that's actually scarier.
Oh, too tough on ISIS.
You can Google Tom Rogan, what will happen in Ramadi. It's going to be very tough because ISIS have done it, but if you can do it, it's good because the Anbar tribes get more consolidation with the United States.
It's good because you put ISIS on the run, but you got to keep them on the run. At the same time, they have a two-pronged approach now. They're operating internationally as well as trying to hold ground for their caliphate, but they want to draw the U.S. into an all-out war because that's part of their prophecy. We have all-out Armageddon, and we cannot go into a war on their terms. We got to do it on our terms.
It's major impact. It will end the myth of ISIS's invincibility and hurt recruiting efforts and morale. Issue 3, Climate Summit.
That this is a turning point. That this is the moment we finally determined we would save our planet. Is the fact that our nations share a sense of urgency about this challenge and a growing realization that it is within our power to do something about it.
President Obama joined 140 other world leaders at a climate summit in Paris, France this week. What's their mission? To reduce global carbon emissions and limit global temperature increases to 2 degrees Celsius on pre-industrial levels by the year 2100. But while Pope Francis says carbon emissions have put humanity, quote, on the edge of suicide, end quote, major disagreements remain. Less wealthy nations are demanding that the West deliver $100 billion a year starting from 2020 to help them adjust their economies. And China, the world's largest carbon emitter, says it won't stop increasing its carbon emissions until 2030. Finally, here at home, 24 states out of 50 and Republicans in Congress are opposing carbon restrictions. Still, Mr. Obama has some star power himself. Celebrities like Facebook creator Mark Zuckerberg and Microsoft creator Bill Gates have set up quote-unquote BEC, Breakthrough Energy Coalition. Also, another genius, Jeff Bezos, creator of Amazon. Together they will personally spend billions of dollars funding clean energy research firms.
President Obama's global warming plans dead on arrival in Congress. Pat Buchanan.
They certainly are, John. They're not going to get anywhere in either house of the Congress. Republican Party opposes them. But more than that, China indicates that we'll start cutting back around 2030 on what we're doing. India is not going for the whole program. Europeans might, but the $100 billion we're going to transfer to the despots of the third world is not going to happen. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
They had a meeting with 150 people, and they have a great sense of urgency, but there is no comparable sense of urgency among the American people or among the people of the earth.
There is a sense of urgency among millennials who understand that the planet they inherit will be compromised if this issue isn't faced head on. This is an important moment when all these nations came together. Granted, what they will sign won't have any enforcement, but it is an important first step. And you're talking about his legislation is dead on arrival. He doesn't have any legislation going to Congress. He's working through regulation, and the courts want to protect the air that we breathe. So a lot of this depends on the president in this country being followed by a Democrat, because Republicans are conservatives in this country. It's the only conservative party in the world that is made up of climate change deniers who don't want to face up to this. And so, I love the fact of the optimism with all of these billionaires coming on board, trying to tap into not only American ingenuity but worldwide ingenuity to try to, to greet this problem with technology. Laugh if you will, Pat. This is a very serious, this is an existential problem that the planet is facing in future generations.
This is what President Obama has committed the U.S. to do. Cut CO2 emissions by 28% from their 2005 level. Such cuts to be complete by 2025. This will impact everything from coal-fired utilities and household electricity rates to mandatory energy-efficient appliances. Yeah. Right. How does it sound to you?
Well, it sounds fine. Eleanor's right. This can be done through regulatory measures without going through Congress, because Pat is also right that Congress ain't going to let anything go through of a serious nature right now with Republicans in charge. But I think the fundamental problem, though, is that climate change has become part of the culture wars now. And attitudes are baked in according to what party people belong to or what their ideological leanings are, and not those wonderful numbers you're reading off there. That's really the more a green eye shade aspect of this. It's not legislation, but this regulation.
Forced prediction. The Federal Reserve will raise interest rates at its upcoming December the 15th meeting. Wall Street will react to the news with a yawn, not a stock market rout. True or false?
True.
True.
True. I gotta go true.
The answer is unmistakably true. Bye-bye.